welcome to another discussion in writing your research paper. Today, we will devote in results and discussion, which is usually the chapter 4 of your research paper. Result and discussion refer to the interpretation and presentation of the data collected and analyzed in the study. The results and discussion sections are critical components of a research study as they provide the opportunity to communicate the findings to other researchers and stakeholders and to draw broader conclusions about the research question. Results typically involve presenting the findings of the study in a clear and concise manner using tables, graphs, or other visual aids to communicate the results. The discussion section, on the other hand, involves interpreting the results, comparing them to existing literature, and identifying the implication of the findings. As you can see in the simple illustration, the chapter 4 results and discussion can be divided into two subsections, the results section and the discussion section. So let us discuss each of these for us to better understand how we can write the results section as well as the discussion section. So what is the results section? The results section of the research paper is where you report the findings of your study based upon the information gathered as a result of the methodology or methodologies that you applied. So take note that the findings should be based upon the result of the methodology. And methodology is basically the chapter before this chapter, which is your chapter 3. So you present simply the result on the implementation of your proposal based on your methodology in this results section. The results section should simply state the findings without bias or interpretation. So you do not interpret yet when presenting the result. You just simply present them as they are. And they should be arranged in a logical sequence. The results section should always be written in the past tense because it has already been done. So that's why it should be written in the past tense. Also, a section describing the results, we call it the findings, is particularly necessary if your paper includes data generated from your own research. So that is basically what the results section is. So from the name itself, you are just presenting the result based on your methodology, based on what you have done in your methodology. Why is it that good results section matters? It matters because when formulating the results section, it is important to remember that the results of a study do not prove anything. Research results can only confirm or reject the research problem underpinning your study. However, the act of articulating the results help you to understand the problem from within, to break it into pieces, and to view the research problem from various perspectives. The page length of this section is set by the amount and types of data to be reported. Be concise using non-textual elements. You can use figures and tables, if appropriate, to present results more effectively. Remember that in chapter 3, we included their data visualization. So it is in the results section where you present those data in figures or in tables, through charts, and any other appropriate data visualization. In deciding what data to describe in your results section, you must clearly distinguish material that would normally be included in a research paper from any raw data or other material that could be included as an appendix. So for raw data, this can be included as part of the appendix. But those data that you already process, you already cleanse and synthesize, you put those data in the results section. But for the raw data, meaning those data that you gather during the testing, during the experimentation, you can put all those data that you tabulated in the appendix. So we will have a discussion on that also in a separate video. So in general, raw data should not be included in the main text of your paper unless requested to do so by your professor. Also, avoid providing data that is not critical to answering the research question. So this is one of the problems that I've also encountered when checking research paper from students is that some students tend to include results that are not necessary, that are not related at all or relevant at all to the research question or to the objective or to the research problem. The background information we describe in the introduction section should provide the reader with any additional context or explanation needed to understand the results. A good rule is to always reread your background section of your paper in your chapter 1 after you have written up your results to ensure that the reader has enough context to understand the results and later how you interpreted the results in the discussion section of your paper. So the key so that you will avoid this problem is to reread the background of the study of your paper and check whether the things that you place in your results is connected to what you have put there. So how do we structure and approach the results section? So in this part, we are talking about how to structure it, how to arrange the results section. So there are two ways. So for most research paper formats, there are two ways of presenting or organizing the results. The first one is to present the results, then followed by a short explanation of the findings. So what do I mean by that? For example, you may have noticed an unusual correlation between two variables during the analysis of your findings. So you have noticed that correlation happened in the results. So it is correct to point this out in the results section. However, speculating as to why this correlation exists and offering a hypothesis about what may be happening belongs in the discussion section of your paper. So you can provide a you can provide the correlation in the result, but you should not interpret yet. You should not yet speculate based on that results because that should be put in the discussion section. The second way to structure is to present a section and then discuss it before presenting the next section, then discussing it, and so on. So this is more common in longer paper because it helps the reader to better understand each finding because you you already are presenting the result and you discuss it and then you have another result and then you discuss it. So in this model, it can be helpful to provide a brief conclusion in the result section that ties each of the findings together and links them to the discussion. So you can choose which of these will work in your paper. You can either choose the first approach wherein you present the results followed by a short explanation of the findings, or you can present a section and then discuss it before presenting the next section and then discussing it and so on. So what about the content? So what should we put in the results section? So what this is what this part is referring to. Because sometimes we put so many things in the results section and we are not sure if those things are really to be included there. So here are some elements that in general the content of your result section should include. First is an introductory context for understanding the results. So before writing the results themselves, before presenting the results, in the first paragraph of the result section, you can state the research problem. So you can restate the research problem. Do not copy paste the problem statement in your chapter 1, but you can simply paraphrase it, make a short version of that problem statement and put it as the introductory so that those who will read your results will have a context about what you are studying all about. So in the first paragraph, you restate the research problem. Also, a summary of your key findings. After the discussion of the research problem, you summarize your key findings, but this should be arranged in a logical sequence. So to make it arranged in a logical sequence, it should follow your methodology section. So for example, in the methodology section, you did first a an interview. Then after the interview, you did an experiment, and then after that, you did another focus group discussion. So the arrangement also of the findings should also be in the same way that you presented them in the methodology. So you present first the result of the first thing that you did, and then the result of the second thing that you did. So it should not be random. So it should follow the sequence of your methodology. So I hope that it's clear. Also, inclusion of non-textual elements. What do we mean by non-textual elements? These are the charts, figures, photos, maps, tables, can be included as part of the content of your results section. This really helps illustrate the findings. Imagine as instead of reading long paragraph, why not just give them a chart where they can just see the results there visually? So it would be more easy and efficient in illustrating the findings of your study. So use them effectively, appropriately, and efficiently in the results section. Also in the text, a systematic description of your results, highlighting for the reader observations that are most relevant to the topic under the investigation should be included. So remember that not all results that emerge from the methodology that you use to gather the data may be relevant. So do not include everything, but only highlight those observations that are most relevant. For example, if the most relevant is the capacity of the equipment, then put it there in the results section. Then for those that are not so relevant, do not highlight them. So make sure to highlight really those most relevant part of your investigation. Use of the past tense when referring to your results. So again, since your study is considered finished, your statement should be in the past tense already. The page length of your results section is guided by the amount and the types of data to be reported. So there's really no range as to the how many pages, but it is based on the types of data that you will report. However, you should only focus on findings again that are important and related to addressing the research problem. One thing that you can do is to make the research problem, the statement in the research problem or the objective of your study, the subheading of your results. Say, for example, you have the result, then you can put there a section wherein you are describing the objective one. So what are the results of your study based on objective one? And then you have objective two. What are the results of your study based on objective two? So in that way, you are emphasizing really the most important part of your results. So relate it always to the research problem. How about non-textual elements? How do we present them? So for non-textual elements like figures, tables, charts, you should place them within the text of the results or include them in the back of the report. However, not do one or the other, but never do both. So you can choose to include them within the text of the results or to just place them at the back of the report in the appendices. Also in the text, refer to each non-textual element in numbered order. So in the way that you stated in the text should also be the way that they are presented in the in the table or the chart, and they should be in order. They should not just be random. And if you place non-textual elements at the end of the report, make sure they are clearly distinguished from any attached appendix material such as raw data. So there should be proper label whether what these non-textual elements are. So later on, we will also have a separate discussion how you would write the appendices of your research paper. And regardless of the placement, each non-textual element must be numbered consecutively and complete with caption. So in our discussion using the formatting for the research paper, remember that we already discussed how you should number the charts, the tables, the figures, and also how you should caption them. So those things still applies here in the results section. Each non-textual element must be titled, numbered consecutively, and complete with a heading, just like what I said. And in proofreading results section, be sure that each non-textual element is sufficiently complete so that it could stand on its own, separate from the text. So what do we mean by that is that when a person read or when a person look at your table or chart, they can already understand it, even if there's no paragraph describing what the chart or the table is. So it can stand on its own, even without the text. So you have to really make sure that you present these figures, tables, charts in a way that it can stand on its own. Avoid when writing the results section. First is discussing or interpreting your results. Take note that you are just simply presenting the results. So save all this for the next section of your paper, which is the discussion. Although where appropriate, you should compare or contrast specific results to those found in other studies. So you can, even if you cannot yet uh, interpret the result, you can still compare it with the findings of another study. So you can look at your literature review or uh, the research paper where you base your study, and you can include a short discussion, how that result is in comparison to the result to those found in other studies. Also, avoid reporting background information or attempting to explain your findings. Say this should be done in your introduction section. But do not panic. Often the result of a study point to the need to provide additional background information or to explain the topic further. So don't think you did something wrong. Revise your introduction as needed. Ignoring negative results. So if some of your results fail to support your hypothesis, do not ignore them. Document them, then state in your discussion section why you believe a negative section or a negative result emerged from your study. So when you encounter these results that are contrary to your expectation, they are not what you expect, they are not what you like, do not delete them, no? But still include them in your documentation. Include them in the result, include them in the discussion, but in the discussion section later on, you will have to discuss why you believe these negative results, unexpected results emerge from your study. Note that negative results and note of these negative results and how you handle them, and they will really often provide you with the opportunity to write a more engaging opportunity, a more engaging discussion section. So do not be afraid to highlight these negative results. Also, including raw data or intermediate calculation. So do not include raw data or intermediate calculations in your results section. What do I mean by that? For example, you have an experimentation and then you have this tabulation of the results of that experimentation. Do not put them, do not put the table here in the results section. But you can present the summary in terms of a chart or in terms of a bar chart or a visualization. So do not put the data themselves. You can ask your instructor if you need to include any of this raw data generated by your study, no? If there are some, for example, in the interview, there are some transcripts from the interview. So ask if it is necessary to include them here, this raw data. So if raw data is to be included, place it in the appendix or set of appendices that are referred to in the text. Another one is be as factual and concise as possible in reporting your findings. So do not use phrases that are vague or non-specific, such as appear to be greater or lesser than or demonstrates promising trends that. So do not be vague. So put the result itself, be factual, be concise. So do not say the result is less than, but give the result. Do not give vague information. Presenting the same data or repeating the same information more than once. So you should also avoid this. If you feel that need to highlight something, you will have a chance to do that in the discussion section, but do not repeat the same information in the result section. Also, do not include confusing figures, and also do not confuse figures with tables. Be sure to properly label any non-textual elements in your paper. If you're not sure, look up the term in a dictionary. So I hope that this discussion on the results, this lecture help you in preparing an effective results section of your paper. About the discussion section. So the discussion section is used to interpret and describe the significance of your findings in the light of what was already known about the research problem being investigated. And this is also used to explain any new understanding or fresh insights about the problem after you have taken the findings into consideration. So always connect to the introduction by way of the research questions or hypothesis posed and the literature that you reviewed. And you should always explain how the study has moved the reader's understanding of the research problem forward from where you left them at the end of the introduction. So that should be the discussion section. That is the purpose of the discussion section. So it is now your opportunity based on the results of your study to interpret that results, to interpret the findings, to describe the significance of the findings. And if there are new understanding or new insights that a person can gain about the problem, you have to also include it here. And take note Again, connect it to the introduction. So that's why you have to reread your introduction, the chapter one of your research paper. Check how you can connect that to your discussion. And your goal is really to move the understanding of the research problem forward. So take note in the chapter one, you discuss there the research gap. So there's a research gap or there is a something that's not been addressed by previous researchers. So this is the part where you tell the the audience of your study, what did you do? What happened? So what's the result? Did you move? Did you lessen the gap? Have you discovered something? So that is the purpose of the discussion. So why a good discussion section matter? So this section is often uh, the most important part of the research paper because it is it most effectively demonstrates your ability as a researcher to think critically about the issue, to develop creative solutions to problems based on findings, and to formulate a deeper, more profound understanding of the research problem that you are studying. The discussion section is where you explore the underlying meaning of your research. So its possible implications in other areas of study can also be presented, and the possible improvement that can be made in order to further develop the concerns of your research. It also matters because this is a section where you need to present the importance of your study and how it may be able to contribute to or to fill the existing gaps in the field, just like what I mentioned, the research gap. So if appropriate, the discussion section is also where you state how the findings from your study revealed new gaps in the literature that had not been previously exposed or adequately described. And this part of your paper is not strictly governed by the objective reporting of information, but rather it is where you can engage in creative thinking about issues through evidence-based interpretation of your findings. So this is where you infuse your results with meaning. So how do we structure the discussion section? So these are just general rules that you can adopt when composing your discussion of the results. First is do not be verbose or repetitive in your discussion. So sometimes we're so excited that we want to present a lot of information, but we somehow repeat information. So avoid it. Be concise and make your points clearly. Avoid using jargon, and as much as possible, we want the discussion section to be understandable even by common people. So if there are technical terms, jargon, so make sure to define them. For example, if there is you're using words like effectiveness and efficiency, some people may confuse what's the difference between the two. So you can also discuss the definition of each. Follow a logical stream of thought in writing the discussion. So do not be just random also in presenting your thought, but think of it just like you are telling a story. So the discussion section is your opportunity to be creative as well. So present your discussion in a way that it's like you are presenting a story that someone would really be interested, that there's climax, that uh, there are points that they have to take note. Use the present verb tense, especially for established facts. So, since in the discussion section, you will be referring back to literature review or to existing studies. So when you present facts from these existing studies, you use present verb tense. And when you refer also to works and preferences, even in the past. in the past tense. If needed, use subheadings to help organize your presentation or to group your interpretation into themes. So just like what we did in the results section where we divide it into your objectives, you can also do that in the discussion section. So you can divide the discussion section also based on your objective. So since you have results number one based on your objective one, so you may also have a discussion section one based on that results section one, which is based on the objective one. So I hope that it makes sense. So you're basically making your discussion organized and it's not being presented just randomly. So how about the content? So what should be part or included in the content of the discussion section? So first is the explanation of the results. Since this is discussion of the results, you are done presenting the result in the result section. So it's your time now to explain the result. Some of the misconception of research students that they just simply summarize the results here in the discussion section. You do not do that. No, you have to explain the results. Comment on whether or not the results were expected and present explanations for the results. Go into greater depth when explaining findings that were unexpected or especially profound. And if appropriate, note any unusual or unanticipated patterns or trends that emerge from your results and explain the meaning of these unanticipated or unexpected trends. So again, you have to explain the results. This is where your critical thinking will come out also. In the content in the discussion, you should also reference your results to previous research. So what do I mean by that is you have to compare your results with the findings from other studies or use the studies to support a claim. Say for example, you are trying to support a theory, you are trying to advance a theory. So based on your results, were you able to advance a theory? And what about the results of other studies? Are they supporting what your result is saying, or are their results different from yours? So you have to compare results to previous studies, especially to your benchmark study. So this can include revisiting the key sources that you cited in your literature review, or save them to cite later in the discussion section if they are more important to compare with your results than being part of the general research you cited to provide context and background information. So the key is to really reference your results to previous research. Deduction. This is a claim for how the results can be applied more generally. So based on the results, you will make a deduction. You will make a, a generalization now. How these results can be applied to a more general application. So for example, describing lessons learned. So now you are proposing recommendations that can help improve a situation or recommending best practices about teaching, or if it is an equipment. So how can you apply these results in a more general uh, application? So there should be a deduction based on the results. And finally, hypothesis, a more general claim or possible conclusion arising from the results, which may be proved or disproved in another research. So you can actually develop a hypothesis at the end of your discussion. So it's not just that you are starting with a hypothesis and and check whether you were able to uh, address the hypothesis, but you can actually develop a hypothesis as a result of your study. So take note, You have to include explanation of your results, references to previous research, deduction, as well as hypothesis. So keep the following sequential points in mind as you organize and write the discussion section of your paper. First, think of your discussion as an inverted pyramid. Organize the discussion from general to specific, linking your findings to the literature. So link your findings to literature, you link it to theory, and you link it to practice. So this is the reason why in the discussion section, you will really have to cite also people, cite studies, cite authors. There will be citations, in-text citations in the discussion section because you're going to link your results to these findings from literature, to theory, and to practice. Use the same key terms, mode of narration, and verb tense, which is present tense that you use when describing the research problem in the introduction. So whatever terms that you use in the introduction, use the same terms here in the discussion. So do not change the way you term the words, the phrases, the names, for example, of the machine. Do not change it, no? Use the same key terms, mode of narration, and verb tense. Begin briefly by restating the research problem you were investigating and answer all of the research questions underpinning the problem that you pose in the introduction. And if it is objective driven, you have to answer whether you're able to achieve all of those objectives in that you stated in the. Also begin by briefly restating the research problem you were investigating. Uh, okay, another one, describe the patterns, principles, and relationships shown by each major findings and place them in proper perspective. So the sequencing of the of providing this information is important. First, you can state the answer, then the relevant results, then cite the work of others. So if appropriate, refer the reader to a figure or table to help enhance the interpretation of the data. So the order of interpreting each major finding should be in the same order as they were described in your results section. So that's why I'm telling you that what you should follow the same logical sequence in the results here when doing the discussion. A good discussion section also includes analysis of any unexpected findings because there are unexpected findings and we cannot avoid that. So this paragraph should begin with a description of the unexpected findings, followed by a brief interpretation as to why you believe these findings appeared and, if necessary, its possible significance in relation to the overall study. So if more than one unexpected findings emerge during the study, describe each them in order that they appeared as you gather the data. So do not delete these unexpected or negative findings, but include them in the results, include them in the discussion. Also, before concluding the discussion, identify the potential limitations and weaknesses. So this is one also of our problem. We tend to neglect the effect of these limitations and weaknesses. We simply jump to the conclusion that this is our conclusion, but we forget that there are limitations and weaknesses that could be present in our study. So comment on their relative importance in relation to your overall interpretation of the results. And if necessary, note how they may affect the validity of the findings. So avoid using an apologetic tone though. Just be honest and be self-critical when identifying these potential limitations and weaknesses. So say for example, if you think that the number of respondents in your survey is just too few for us to make a conclusion or recommend or generalization. So you have to state this potential limitation and weaknesses before jumping to conclusion, or perhaps you only have limited trials or maybe there are some instruments uh, that could limit also the data that you gathered. You have to discuss them and how they could possibly affect the results of your study. Also, the discussion section should end with a concise summary of the principal implication of the findings, regardless of the statistical significance. So give a brief explanation about why you believe the findings and conclusions of your study are important and how they support broader knowledge or understanding of the research problem. So now we are talking about the end part of your discussion. This can be followed by any recommendations for future research. However, do not offer recommendations which could have been easily addressed within your study. So you also have to think of that critically. Do not do not ask another researcher to do something that you can do. So why ask them to do that if you yourself can do it? So provide recommendation that could be it could be a recommendation that it is another kind of topic for research. So that should be the recommendation. It should not be something that because you are limited by money or by tool, you did not do it. But you have to recommend something that can become another study. So what should be the overall objective, when you write your discussion? First is you have to reiterate the research problem and state the major findings. So briefly reiterate to your readers the research problem or the problems that you are investigating and the methods that you use to investigate them. Then move quickly to describe the major findings of the study. You should write a direct, declarative, and succinct proclamation of the results of the study. You should also explain the meaning of the findings and why they are important. And again, relate the findings to similar study. Also, consider alternative explanation of the finding. And finally, acknowledge the limitation of your study. That is why we have to have a discussion also as to what could be the potential weakness and limitation of our study. And just like what I said, make suggestion for further research. So what to avoid in your discussion? So do not waste entire sentences restating your results. So do not copy paste your results in your discussion section. Recommendations for further research can be included in either the discussion or can also be included in the conclusion of your paper. But do not repeat your recommendation in the both section. So if you want to put your recommendation in after the conclusion, then do not put recommendation here. Do not introduce new result in the discussion. So be wary of mistaking the reiteration of a specific finding for the interpretation. So do not invent new results. Do not invent results. Do not present them as if there's new results emerging in the discussion. Also, use of the first person is acceptable, but too much use of the first person may actually distract the reader from the main points. So try to avoid as much as possible using first person, like I. So I hope that this discussion on the discussion, the results and discussion, which is part of your chapter 4 will help you later on as you write the chapter 4 or the results and discussion of your paper. So if you think that this lecture helped you, feel free to share it to others so that they may also learn from this lecture video.